I was 19 years old when this happened, and I want to be completely upfront with you about who I was at that point in my life because I think it matters. I was a college student, first year, the kind of person who stayed up too late and slept too little, and thought that being young meant nothing could really get to you. I had never had any experience that made me question the way the world worked. I did not believe in ghosts, and I had never had any reason to. Life was pretty simple and pretty good, and nothing had ever suggested to me that the space around me held anything I should be afraid of. My brother and his wife had a baby about 6 months before all this. A little girl, their first, and they were the kind of new parents who had done everything right. The nursery was set up perfectly. The monitor system they had was one of those newer ones with a camera and a screen so you could see the room in real time along with hearing it, and they had it positioned in the corner of the nursery with a good angle over the crib. They had tested everything before she was born, and the system worked well. I know this because I had been over to their place several times before the night I am describing, and I had seen the monitor running. Just a quiet image of an empty crib in the corner of a well-lit room with soft colors on the walls. Normal. Fine. The way a baby's room is supposed to look. They asked me to babysit on a Friday night. My sister-in-law had a work thing, and my brother wanted to go with her, and they needed someone for a few hours. I said yes without hesitation because my niece was 6 months old and had not yet developed the capacity to do anything except exist and occasionally require a diaper change. And I had a paper due the following week that I needed to work on, and the idea of sitting in their quiet house with a sleeping baby while I got through my reading list sounded genuinely appealing. They left at around 7 in the evening. My niece went down without any trouble, which I had been warned she usually did, and by 7:30 I was sitting on the couch with my laptop and my textbooks and the baby monitor on the cushion beside me. The monitor screen was showing exactly what it always showed: the corner of the nursery, the crib, the soft yellow nightlight on the far wall casting everything in a gentle glow. My niece was asleep. The house was quiet. Everything was exactly as it should have been. I worked for about 2 hours. I was tired from the week, and the couch was comfortable, and somewhere around 9:30, I drifted off with my laptop still open on my chest. I do not know exactly how long I was asleep. What I know is what woke me up. Whispering. It was coming from the baby monitor. Not the soft sounds of a sleeping infant. Not the ambient hiss that monitors make. Whispering. A low, continuous, rhythmic sound that had the unmistakable quality of a voice saying something just below the threshold of intelligibility. I could not make out words, but it had the cadence of words. The rise and fall of it, the specific texture of it, was a voice. Was someone speaking quietly and close to the microphone? I grabbed the monitor and looked at the screen. There was something in the corner of the room. I want to be as precise as I can about what I saw, because I have replayed this image in my mind more times than I can count, and I want to describe it accurately rather than dramatize it. In the far corner of the nursery, the corner that was furthest from the crib and furthest from the nightlight, there was a figure. Dark, tall, completely still. It was not solid in the way that a person standing in a room is solid. It had the quality of a shadow that was somehow denser than the shadows around it. A concentration of darkness in a human shape that was present in a way that did not belong in that room, in that corner, at that angle given the single light source on the opposite wall. It was standing between the corner and the crib. I have never felt terror in a physical way before that moment. I had been scared before, the kind of scared that makes your heart beat faster and gives you a jolt of adrenaline. But the feeling I had looking at that monitor screen was different in a way that is hard to convey in words. It was total. It went through my whole body at once, from my chest outward, like something had reached through the screen and made contact with something fundamental. My hands were shaking before I had consciously decided to move. I ran to the nursery. The room was empty. I mean that literally and completely. I stood in the doorway with the light on and looked at every corner and every surface, and there was nothing there. My niece was asleep in her crib, on her back, exactly as I had left her. The corners were empty. The room was warm and soft and completely ordinary, and there was absolutely nothing in it except a sleeping baby and a young man standing in the doorway with his heart going at a pace he had never experienced before. I picked her up. I did not think about whether waking her was a good idea or a bad idea. I just picked her up and walked back to the living room and sat on the couch with her against my chest, and I did not put her down for the rest of the night. She slept on me. I did not sleep at all. My brother came home around midnight. His wife went straight to bed, and he came into the living room and found me sitting upright on the couch with the baby, and whatever was on my face made him stop in the doorway the same way I had stopped in the nursery doorway earlier. He asked me what was wrong. I showed him the monitor screen, which was now showing the nursery normally, empty and quiet, the nightlight doing its job. I told him what I had seen, and I described the figure in the corner, and I described the whispering, and I watched his face while I was talking. He did not look surprised. He asked me to keep my voice down so his wife would not hear. He told me that he had seen the same thing. Not once, multiple times. He had seen the figure on the monitor on several different nights, and had heard the whispering more times than that, always from the monitor, always after his daughter had gone to sleep. He had never told his wife because she was already anxious about being a new parent, and he did not know what telling her would accomplish. He had told himself there was a rational explanation each time, and he had gone back to bed each time, and by morning the rational explanation always seemed more plausible than what he had seen at 2 in the morning. But seeing my face, he said, was different, because I had come in there not knowing anything. I had no history with the house, no accumulated anxiety about being a new parent, no particular reason to see something that was not there, and I had seen exactly what he had seen. They lived in that house for another 4 years. 4 years. My niece grew up in that room, with whatever was in the corner of it, and she never seemed frightened by it, which my brother always said was either reassuring or the most disturbing part, depending on how you looked at it. She did talk about her special friend, starting from around the age of 2 when she had enough language to do so. She described a tall person who came to visit at night. She said the tall person was quiet, but she could hear them sometimes when she was almost asleep. She said they stood near her bed and watched her. My brother never confirmed to his daughter that what she was describing was real. He just listened and nodded and tucked her in and checked the monitor every night for 4 years and tried to decide how he felt about what he saw on it. I have babysat there since. I go in the daytime. I have never spent another night in that house, and I do not intend to. I have thought about my niece many times since they moved, about whether whatever was in that corner came with her or stayed with the house, about whether she still hears it when she is almost asleep, about whether she would even think of it as frightening, given that it was simply always there from the very beginning of her life. The monitor is still in my brother's house somewhere, packed in a box with other things from when the kids were small. I have asked him not to set it up in the new place. He said he had not planned to. He said he had seen enough of what it showed him. My wife and I got married young. I was 22 and she was 21, and we had no money worth mentioning, and the apartment we could afford was a basement unit in an older building in the city. I want to be clear about the layout, because it matters later in the story. It was a true basement apartment, meaning the windows were at ground level, the ceilings were lower than a normal floor, and the whole place had a quality to it that I can only describe as underground even when you were standing in the middle of it. It was not an unpleasant apartment for what it was. It was affordable, and it was ours, and we were young and happy, and we moved in on a Tuesday in early September and had a bottle of cheap wine on the floor of the empty living room, and thought we were doing just fine. The first sign that something was wrong happened on the 3rd night. I want to describe what happened carefully, because my wife and I have talked about this many times over the years since, and we have always agreed on the specific details. which I think is important for understanding that this was not a case of one person's imagination running away from them in an unfamiliar place. We were in bed. It was late. We had both been asleep, and I woke up to a sound from the kitchen. A single sharp sound, like something hard hitting the countertop. I lay still and listened for a moment, and did not hear anything further, so I went back to sleep. The next morning, my wife asked me if I had heard the sound from the kitchen. I had. She had heard it too, and had also gone back to sleep. We assumed it was the building, settling, pipes, something in the walls, the ordinary sounds of an old basement apartment. Over the next 2 weeks, we heard that sound, or something like it at least, a dozen times. Always at night, always after we had gone to bed. Sometimes from the kitchen, sometimes from the hallway, once from inside the bedroom closet, which was closer than either of us was comfortable with. We kept telling each other it was the building. Old buildings talk at night. We understood that. Then, things started moving. I do not mean that we saw things moving in real time. I mean that things were in different places than we had left them. Not dramatically different, not thrown across the room, just slightly off. A glass that had been on the left side of the drying rack was on the right side in the morning. My wife's keys, which she always put on the hook by the door, were on the kitchen table. A book I had set on my nightstand was on the floor beside the bed. Small movements. The kind you could chalk up to not remembering exactly where you put something if it happened once. It happened enough times over enough weeks that neither of us was chalking it up to memory lapses anymore, but neither of us was saying out loud what we were starting to think either. The feeling started around the same time as the objects moving. I do not know how else to describe it except as a presence. A quality in the apartment, particularly in the hallway and the kitchen, that had not been there in the first few nights. The feeling of sharing a space with something that was aware of you. You know how you can tell when someone has just left a room, even though you did not see them leave. There is a residual quality to the air that tells you the space was recently occupied. This was like that, but in reverse. Like a space that felt occupied even when you knew you were the only people in it. My wife felt it before I admitted I felt it, and when she finally named it, I said yes immediately, because I had been waiting for her to say it, so I did not have to say it first. We were not alone in that apartment. The escalation happened fast once it started. Within a month of moving in, the sounds were nightly, and they had moved from single impacts to something more sustained. Walking. I want to be precise here, because I know how that sounds. The sound of footsteps in the hallway outside our bedroom door, moving back and forth. The specific rhythmic weight of bipedal movement on a hard floor, at 2 and 3 in the morning, while my wife and I lay in bed, looking at each other in the dark and not speaking. We checked the hallway multiple times. Empty, every time. We checked whether the sounds could be coming from the apartment above us. The tenant upstairs was a quiet single person who worked early mornings and was reliably in bed by 9. The flashes of light started next. This one I would not have believed if I had not experienced it myself, because it sounds like the kind of thing you imagine rather than the kind of thing that actually happens. But my wife and I both saw them on multiple occasions, and we have both described them the same way every time we have talked about it since. We would be walking through the apartment in the dark, crossing the hallway to get a glass of water or to use the bathroom, and there would be a flash of extremely bright white light that illuminated the entire space for a fraction of a second, not from outside. The windows were at ground level and faced a wall, and there was nothing outside them that could have produced that quality of light, not from any electrical source in the apartment. Just light. Total and immediate, from no identifiable origin, and then dark again. We told ourselves it was a short in the wiring. We called our landlord, and he sent someone to look at the electrical system. Nothing was found. The flashes continued. By the 3rd month, my wife was not sleeping well, and I was not sleeping well, and we had stopped having the easy, young married couple evenings that the first weeks had promised us. We moved around the apartment carefully, The way you move around a space that you are not sure is entirely yours. We stopped leaving things in the hallway after dark. We slept with the bedroom door closed and a chair under the handle, which we had never discussed and never explained to each other, but which we both participated in. The night it ended was a Tuesday, which I only remember because it was exactly 3 months after we had moved in on a Tuesday in September. We were going to bed. We walked into the bedroom together, which we had started doing rather than one of us going ahead. And the moment we both crossed the threshold into the bedroom, a voice spoke. It came from inside the room, not from the hallway or the kitchen or the closet. From inside the room we were standing in. It said, clearly and without ambiguity, my name. And then it said, move. Not a whisper, a voice. Speaking at a normal volume in a normal register with the specific quality of a person who is telling you something they expect you to understand and act on. I looked at my wife. She looked at me. I said, out loud, to whatever was in that room, you have got it. We packed a bag that night and went to stay with her parents, and we did not go back to the apartment except to collect our things and terminate the lease. Our landlord kept our deposit. We did not fight him on it. I have thought about that voice many times over the years, about the specific word it used, which was move, not get out, not leave, not any of the dramatic things a ghost in a story is supposed to say. Move, the way you would tell someone who is standing in your way, practical, direct, the way you speak to someone when you want them to understand that the conversation is over and the decision has been made. Whatever lived in that basement apartment was patient for 3 months while we tried to convince ourselves that the sounds and the lights and the moving objects and the footsteps in the hallway were all things with ordinary explanations. It watched us reinforce the bedroom door with a chair like that would help. It watched us stop using the hallway after dark and stop leaving our things in the kitchen. It waited. And then one Tuesday night, it simply told us to go. We went. I do not think about that apartment with fear anymore. Mostly, I think about it with something more like respect for whatever it was. It did not harm us. It did not do anything except make it clear, over 3 increasingly firm months, that the space was not ours to have. When we did not take the hints, it spoke plainly. There is something almost reasonable about that, in its own strange way. We moved into a second-floor apartment after that, and I have never lived in a basement unit since, and I do not plan to. My wife says the same thing. We have never needed to explain to each other why. We both know exactly why. We moved to the house when I was 12, and my sister was 9, and my parents were at the stage of their lives, where a house with land and space and trees behind it seemed like exactly the right thing. My dad grew up rural and had always wanted to get back to something like that. My mom liked the idea of a yard and a garden and the particular quality of quiet that you do not get in a neighborhood where the houses are 10 feet apart. The house was older, a good price for its size, and it sat on the edge of a stretch of forest that ran back further than we could see from the kitchen window. It looked like the kind of place where good things happened to a family. For the first month, it was exactly that. Then, our dogs changed. We had 2 dogs at the time, both of them large, both of them the kind of dogs who had never been afraid of anything in their combined 6 years of living. One of them, a shepherd mix named Frank, had once barked down a coyote in our old backyard without hesitation. The other, a retriever named June, was so relaxed and easy that we sometimes joked she would welcome a burglar into the house. They were steady animals, reliable, not dogs who invented things to be afraid of. Within 2 weeks of moving into the house by the woods, both of them had changed in a way that was impossible to miss and impossible to explain. Frank stopped going near the back fence entirely, not gradually. Immediately and completely, as if someone had drawn a line he was not going to cross. June was worse. She had always slept in the bedroom with my sister, but she stopped doing that and started sleeping in the hallway outside the bedroom door instead, facing the stairs, every single night. She did not sleep deeply anymore. She slept in that particular alert half-sleep of a dog who is listening to something and does not want to stop listening. My parents noticed but attributed it to the transition. New house, new smells, new territory. Dogs take time to adjust. That was a reasonable thing to say, and I believed it for about another 2 weeks, right up until the first night I heard the sounds from the forest. It started as walking. That is the most accurate word I have for it. The sound of something moving through the underbrush at the back of the property, behind the fence, in the dark portion of the tree line that the porch light could not reach. Not the random, irregular movement of animals, because I had grown up around animals, and I knew what that sounded like. This was paced, deliberate, the rhythm of something bipedal covering ground at a consistent rate. I woke my dad the first night it happened. He stood on the back porch with a flashlight and scanned the tree line and found nothing. He said it was probably deer. I knew the sound of deer in brush, and this was not it, but I was 12, and he was my dad, and I went back to bed. It happened the next night, and the night after that. Over the following 2 weeks, the sounds escalated slowly in a way that I think was the most frightening aspect of the whole experience, because it was not dramatic. It was gradual. First the walking sounds, then occasionally a heavier sound, something impacting the ground with more weight than the walking suggested. Then, the first time I heard the knocking, it came from the back fence. 3 knocks, evenly spaced, on the wood of the fence panel nearest the tree line. Not a branch in the wind, not an animal brushing past. 3 deliberate, evenly spaced knocks on the fence, like a person on the other side announcing their presence. Frank, who was inside the house, lost his mind. After the knocking started, it began on the windows too. Not every night, but regularly on different windows, always after dark. My parents had security cameras installed. After the 3rd time, it happened on the back windows. My dad was convinced at this point that it was a person, someone in the woods, someone who had maybe been living out there and who was testing the boundaries of the property. I thought he was probably right, because the alternative did not have a name I was willing to say out loud at that point. The cameras did not catch anything. The knocking would happen. One of my parents would check the footage, and the footage would show nothing. The back door in the frame, the fence, the edge of the tree line in whatever the camera's night vision could reach, and no person, no animal, nothing. The thing that finally made my parents genuinely frightened instead of pragmatically problem-solving was the voices. It started small. I was in my room one evening and I heard my mother call my name from the backyard. I went downstairs and she was in the kitchen. I told her I had heard her call me from outside, and she told me she had been inside for the past hour and had not called anyone. I filed it away. 2 nights later, my sister came into my room at 10 in the evening because she had heard our dad calling her name from the back fence. She had been about to go outside when something stopped her. She said she did not know what, just a feeling. She came to find me instead. Our dad was asleep. After that, it happened to everyone in the house at least once. A voice from the tree line or the back of the property calling one of our names in a tone that was close enough to familiar that your body responded before your brain caught up. My mother's voice calling my sister. My dad's voice calling me. My voice, my own voice, as I apparently sound to other people, calling my mother's name from the back garden after dark. That last one was the one that ended it. My mother heard what sounded like me calling her from the backyard at 11 at night when I was asleep in my room. She came to check on me before going to look outside, which was the decision that mattered. I was in bed. She came back downstairs and she woke my dad, and she said she was done. We moved out 6 weeks later. My parents told the realtor there had been a pest problem in the walls, which was partly true in the sense that whatever was in those woods had made itself at home on our property in a way that felt deeply personal. They did not tell her about the voices. They did not tell her about the cameras that caught nothing. They sold the house to another family, and I have thought about that family many times since. I do not know what was in that forest. I have spent years trying to construct the rational version of events, and there are parts of it that admit rational explanation, and parts of it that do not. The knocking could have been a person. The walking sounds could have been a large animal with an unusual gait. The voices from the tree line, which sounded exactly like the people inside the house, which called us by name and used our individual voices, is the part that I have never found a satisfying ordinary explanation for. What I know is that whatever was out there had been listening to us long enough to learn our voices, and it had been patient about the learning, quiet in the early weeks, watching and listening before it began to show us what it knew. That is the part that has never stopped being frightening to me. Not the knocking, not the sounds in the dark, the patience of it. The long, quiet period before it began, during which it was out there in the trees, in the dark, listening to us become a family in a new house, learning the sounds of us, learning our names,